and welcome to Quilt Stories. Today we'll be talking with Birgit Schuller from Germany, and she's done this most amazing quilt, which is actually hanging behind her, called the Sprinter. And when I first saw it online, I thought, oh, okay, it's a sprinter and a shadow on white fabric. And it wasn't till I actually started looking more closely that I realized it has the most incredible quilting, and it's won quite a few awards. And so I would like to welcome you today. Hi, Birgit.
Hi, Lisa. It's very lovely that you invited me to be part of your story session. And yeah, well, I'd be happy to share a little bit about my sprinter.
So you're looking very happy, I think, because you've just won a big award with the quilt. Is that correct?
That's right. That was at the FOQ in 2018. Yeah, I think it was 2018. I had entered the quilt in British Isles, Quilters Guild of the British Isles, and it won first prize.
And I'm not surprised. It's really amazing. The level of detail is incredible. Would you like to tell us about the inspiration for the quilt?
I have been a long-arm quilter for 15 years, and I've always entered quilts in shows all over the world. And at some point I decided I needed to do something new. Most of my quilts before that were regular, more traditionally based quilts. I had the urge to do something different, and the one thing I did different here was to choose the landscape format. Then I wanted to do something that was more on the whole cloth side of quilting and not so much piecing. There's no piecing in here. The sprinter and the shadow, they are raw edge applique. So in the beginning, you really have a huge canvas of white fabric and the sprinter on there. And it looked kind of, well, yeah, boring or nothing special at all. So it's a sprinter. I took a photograph that I found online and traced the sprinter in this pose and just, yeah, used my scrap basket and pulled out green and blue fabrics and combined them to make this collage, raw edge appliqued onto that fabric, copied it onto a gray fabric, solid gray fabric, and made the shadow. Choose green and yellow because I had my son in mind already. He's a track and field athlete in his teen years. He was pretty successful here in Germany on the national level, and basic connection that I have with competitive sports. Theme that I was thinking to enter this quilt for was at a show that in the end didn't happen, and the theme was speed. So okay. Speed is something that can be fast cars or anything loud and noisy. And when I thought about theme speed, I boiled it down to just running.
What fabric did you use as the background fabric?
Cotton. It's just a marbled light gray cotton fabric. Then I had the top, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I still had this theme speed in the back of my mind, and I was just thinking how to do it, what to do it, but speed is a dynamic process. So I did not want to just have the static momentary image of the sprinter in this one pose, but decided to make it a dynamic process. That's why I asked my husband to help me digitize this 12-step sequence of the sprint movement. Here's from books from my son, and my husband helped me digitize those figures so that I could quilt them out with my Pro Stitcher quilting. First of all, digitize the individual 12 figures, and then cut them in half to have a top part and a bottom part, and then try to connect them in a way that the top part is quilted first, and then on the way back, the legs are added.
Okay, so that's the top half happening. Right.
There's certain sections where you see backtracking, but that's just necessary to make it continuous line.
Digitizing is something that's just completely out of my realm of understanding. People talk about it, but I have no idea what's involved. But I suspect it's not as easy as you would think.
Well, it's not as difficult either. It's just time consuming, and that's why I'm very thankful that my husband supports me in a way that he does these things. So I just tell him, okay, I would like to do a sprinter sequence of 12 poses, and I need that digitized. Okay, where do you have the pictures? Get them here, and I'll just fill around with it and make it work.
Are they similar? Are they the same?
They are the same sequences, but by changing the size, they just get wider and bigger, and I can manipulate the digitized sequence in any way I want. So I can make it, I can stretch it, I can condense it, I can take out the individual figures and quilt them separately, which I did on the bottom. It's always the same sequence, but just by changing the size, by modifying the width or the height, I can make them look pretty differently.
Any reason for the different color choices?
I was playing around with colors, and the sprinter itself, the Applicate sprinter, is in blue and green, and I wanted to stay in that color family, and just using white I thought was too boring, and that's when I quilted the small sequences in white. They were hardly visible, so I inked them in later on with gray. We'll see that later. Those ones, I just wanted to, I wanted to make them visible. If I would have wanted to hide them, I would have quilted them in white, but I wanted to make them visible. But again, here, it took me a while to be brave enough to use those contrasting colors. And in the beginning, I started and I used thinner thread and more subdued colors, and I didn't like it. So I had stitched out 3 sequences, and you see how tiny the stitches are.
Yep.
So it took me quite a while to pick out all these sequences. For this quilt, the unpicking was a interesting process because I had enough time to think. I was just thinking about what I'm doing, about the theme speed, and if that was what I really wanted or needed to do in this quilt. And while unpicking those stitches, all of a sudden I had this idea of, it's a false start. So, okay, it's back to the start line and start all over again. It was not so much the speed thing, but this, okay, it's a race. Yeah, it was a liberating process. And together with this liberating, this idea of liberation, it was, okay, let's shift the focus from speed more to what running thing is for me. I mean, my son is an athlete, okay, but I myself, I run too, leisurely. I go in the woods, go outside, either by myself or with a friend. I just run to clear my mind, to sort my thoughts, to get a new perspective on things, but it's freedom in a way. It's just breaking away from everyday restraints, finding your own thing, doing your own thing, and just refreshing your thoughts. So that was kind of this train of thoughts I had while unpicking those first tries here. And then I got really brave. I let the quilt take over. I said, okay, now I really go for the thicker, bolder colored thread, which looks a lot more brave when you are close to the quilt. When you look at it from a distance, you see it's not as bold. It's actually exactly what was needed to make the figures visible at all.
I quite enjoy the unpicking process. I don't know why. I get a lot of practice at it. So I can see you've used the darker color to highlight them and then flatten down the background by
right.
It's not even a stipple, really. It's just a
it's I don't know what you call it.
Flattening
micro stippling galore. It's boring. It's tedious. It takes so much time. It's another of these sessions or phases of this quilt where you have a lot of time to think and make sure that you get it done and keep the density similar in all places. Yeah.
I know you're known for your ruler work. Your ruler work is amazing.
The curved lines, the straighter lines, they are ruler work, most of them. But the fields, they are free motion quilting, like the ribbons and the pebbles and the swirls. They are all free motion. Yeah. And I think because since I did those fields free motion, the lines look as if they are not as straight or as maybe should be, but they are a ruler work, and maybe it's just the photograph that the quilt isn't completely flat at that.
I think one of the really interesting things I notice when I'm looking at these photos is they reverse, and things that are supposed to stick out look like they're concave. You have to really look and you go, oh no, it's sticking out, like the figures and the little circles and things, and it's quite an interesting sort of exercise for your eyes, I think. how did you do that? And then I realized, oh, no, actually, they are standing up and it's the background. It's, I really love it. It's just so textural. You did the figures and then you started filling in all the background shapes.
Yes. And I started from the left to the right. So in the beginning, I only worked from the left edge up to the applique sprinter because I had no idea what would be going on the right side.
Oh, okay.
Because as I told you, I chose the landscape format because it's this covering a certain distance
Yep.
of a race. And in the beginning, you start at the start line, and it's all tactics. It's what you have learned. It's all this being in this tunnel, being focused on the finish line, on your goal, and it's just this automated processes that's very streamlined, very very clear, very straight. Towards the last 10 meters of a race, everything can happen or nothing.
Yes, indeed.
So, and nobody knows that. It's you're working towards that last 10 meters, and all of a sudden everything is possible. And I had no idea in the beginning how to bring this across in the quilting. And sometimes it's just, yeah, some things happen. So I had a urgent customer quilt coming in, which had me take this quilt off the machine. When you're on your long arm, you only see that section that you're working on right now. You don't have the possibility to just step back and look at the whole thing from a distance. Okay. I had the chance to do that. And all of a sudden I knew, okay, it's come to this point and the finish line is right there. Now is the time to break this thing up, to make it curl or just curve away and let out that restricted, or that energy that has been in that body, and just let it explode. Yes. So that's why there are more curvy lines and on the right side, big figure running into the over the finish line, and
the arrow as well. There's definite direction. Yeah. This is a close-up of the quilting. I love close-ups of quilting.
Yeah, and I like this shot especially because I really managed to somehow show the muscles and
yes.
the legs. So that,
no, they're great. The grey figures at the top you've inked in?
Yes, and those here.
So how did you do that?
I separated the individual stages from the sequence, quilted them in big size and separately. And
what ink did you use to
Copics because my daughter used them, so
it just gives a little bit of contrast as well
with the sequences. And the dawned on me that this could as well be copied from a Greek vase. Like when you imagine those the Greek vases we had in our history books in high school, they had those competing athletes and those Greek ornaments. It was nothing I did intentionally, but when I look, there's a touch of that to that too. Well, and as you see, I'm I try to restrict myself to just a few motifs. It's a repeat of the ribbons, the pebbles, and the spirals. So that's all. It's not that I try to show as much as possible. It's just having a base palette of motifs to use, and then just vary them in sizes and orientation to make them speak for themselves. And that's something that actually runs like a red line through my entire work. I try not to feel that I have to show people all that I can do, but just restrict myself to a few elements and then play with those.
Nice and close.
Well, I left those unshaded on purpose because they were dominant or prominent enough. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that I did on the left side of the applique figure, I used all solid thread in the colored thread section, and on the right side, on the finish line side, I decided to use variegated thread to break up the monotonous feeling of the solid and bring in more joy and more, make it more colorful.
Sorry, what thread do you normally use? Do you have?
I love to work with anything shiny, so it's mostly 3-ply polyester thread from different manufacturers. Superior Threads. I use Glide thread. I use smart thread here from Germany, refill, whatever is on hand. And I'm not a thread snob in a way that I would use just thread from one company or one line in a project. For me, it's more important to find the perfect shade of color that I want.
The next shot here is a little bit blurry, probably because people were moving so fast. Sort of the attention that it was gathering at Birmingham. There was attention being drawn to it even before prizes had been announced, by the look of it.
I don't know where the ribbon, actually I think the ribbon is on there somewhere to the right, and it's the quilt is just moving a little bit.
Okay.
But the funny thing was, this was the first or second time, I think the second time that I was able to attend Festival of Quilts. I wasn't able to attend the award ceremony because my plane only landed an hour later. It was so interesting to just stand back and watch the people watching my quilt.
Yep.
And there were people all the time. It was really like, okay, they are looking at your work and doing something with them, where they're taking pictures, and even male visitors, which are often just accompanying their wives, standing there and taking out their cameras and discussing this quilt. So this was really interesting. And I was just standing there and watching at the crowd, and all of a sudden a lady from the crowd comes up to me and asks me, "It's your quilt, isn't it?" And I say, "Yes, why are you asking?" "Well, because you are watching the people and not the quilt."
A sense of satisfaction that must have been as well.
Yeah, that's right. So it was great.
And here we have a final shot of the quilt in all its glory on your floor.
Yeah, right.
Which, I think we all take photos, and I know you stood up in a ladder to take this photo. Well deserved of the win. You're teaching now. I know that you've got some interesting kits of your designs that you've had printed. And I'll put a link in the information section of the video to your website, and so people can see the other things that they can do. Unfortunately, teaching is sort of a bit of a mess this year. Hopefully 2021 might be a better year for everybody. I would like to thank you so much for being part of this little project of mine. It's great. To me, this is like a big quilt lesson, and I hope our viewers are enjoying it as well. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe. There's a subscribe button down below, and do a thumbs up. If you have any ideas of other quilts that you've fallen in love with at shows and you'd really like to know more about them, or you'd like to meet the maker and hear about their ideas, their inspiration, their problem solving, because we all go through that process, and it's just lovely to hear that even quilts that win major prizes that have caused a lot of angst for their makers. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for having me, and it was really great fun, and I hope, people will enjoy it.
I'm sure they will. Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye.